Hello coders, it's Tishay from Developers College, and we are going to be learning about variables and data types in this tutorial. So in the last tutorial we talked about basic syntax, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about variables and data types. So if you want to do anything really in PHP or in programming, you need to understand the very basic concepts of what we call variables and data types. Basically, every single thing that you're going to do throughout your career, variables are going to be involved. So this is basically like your starting point into becoming a programmer. Once you understand this concept very easily, basically everything that we're going to do throughout this whole entire series will come easy to you. A PHP variable starts with the dollar sign followed by the name of the variable. So let's quickly write an example over here. So we're going to declare a new variable, the dollar sign that I was talking about, the name of the variable, and the value, in this case, hello world. Don't forget to add your semicolon. And what you'll notice right off the bat is that in our last code, what we did, we wrote echo, but now we are writing greeting equals to hello world. If we run this, nothing is going to show up. Why? Because well, we are not printing anything. We just assigned a variable, so nothing is going to show up. So this is the very basics of declaring a variable. So what we did was this dollar sign I was talking about, the name and the value. In PHP, the dollar sign is mandatory and is important if you want to create a variable. All of your variable must begin with a dollar sign. What you notice, unlike some other programming language, is that there is no specific command used to create the variable. The variable is only created once there's a value assigned to it. So once I delete this, it's not going to have any value. And in fact, as far as PHP can tell, the variable is not created. So PHP only creates a variable once the value has been added. So you don't need any special keyword like string or int like in Java or in some other programming language. And PHP, it's just the name and the value. That's all. So naming rules. When you're naming your variable, you cannot just call it whatever you like, because they have to be what's it called, some rules. Of course, you can get creative with your naming conventions and how you can name your variables, but there are some simple guidelines that guide us towards how we are creating our variable and how exactly what to do and what not to do while creating the variables. So we're going to list some of the naming rules that exist while creating your variable. Number one, a variable in PHP must start with a dollar sign. Like I said earlier, a variable must start with a letter or an underscore character. A variable name cannot start with a number. Uh, a variable name is case sensitive, meaning this value greeting over here and this other variable, they are actually two different variable. So in PHP, case actually matters. Greeting, lowercase greeting is entirely different from uppercase greeting. So those are the few naming rules that we have. These rules just give us a guideline into how we are creating a variable. We should, of course, we can still get creative with our naming conventions and how we name variables, but these are just simple guidelines into guiding us basically into how we should name our variable and allowing PHP to better understand our variable. So the next thing we're going to be doing is outputting variables. So what you can see here is that we have only initialized a variable. What about printing it to the screen? How do we do that? You see, I'm going to show you right now. To output your variable, all you need to do is echo out greeting, and there you have it. It's going to bring out hello world. Now you can see that we have output our variable. For example, if I have, say, a variable called num and I call it 10, and I also have another one called num2 and I call it 20, we can output a variable by performing a simple operation called num, okay, don't forget your dollar sign, plus so what we did here is pretty simple. We initialized two variables actually, num, when we assigned the value 10 to it, we created num2 and we assigned the value 20 to it. So now we output the two variables, and but we did something a little spicy over here. We didn't just output the values. We added a what arithmetic operator to add the two values that we have just initialized and print out the addition. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see 30 because we just created two variables, and we performed a little operation with this arithmetic operator, the addition sign. So we added their values. You can see we don't need to echo 10 and 20. We just need to echo the name of the variables, and it will automatically perform the operation on their values. So that's all you need to know about outputting variables. We are going to, of course, get into more of this while we move on into the tutorial, but at least you understand the basic concepts. Once you declare a variable, you can echo the name of the variable, and you can also, you know what, let me show you something else. So for example, if we want to say we create a variable called name, and we name it developers college, which is a weird name, but just go with it. We can also do a very tricky situation here. We can just add I. What we're just going to add is a dot, name, and another dot, and an exclamation mark. Simple. So when we run it, what we should see, don't forget your semicolon, what we should see is this, I, Developers College. So if we add a little bit space here, let's add a space because it doesn't look formatted. Yep, you can see that it now has the space. So what do we do here? We didn't do anything tricky. What we did is that we echoed I, then we add this little full stop here, which is basically concatenation. We are joining in I plus the variable name. The operator for that is a full stop. It's adding those, how do you put it? Adding the quotes, then the variable name. So what we did here was we echoed I, then the variable name, which is Developers College, then an exclamation mark and a full stop. That's the end of it. So you can see that you can also echo values together with variable names, and it will come out pretty nicely. So those are the basics of just outputting variables, and later on in this tutorial, as we go on, we're going to be doing more of outputting variables. So PHP data types. Of course, data types is what we need to learn if we want to really understand in-depthly what variables are doing. So you can see that in just a couple of minutes we have created the variables that has numbers. We have created the variables that have a bunch of characters, and yeah, you might be wondering what's the difference. Is there anything that distinguish any of them, or is there anything specific to any of these variables? Yes, actually there are. Variables can store data of very different types, and different data types all have different abilities and functions. PHP supports the following data types: strings, integer, floats, boolean, arrays, and null. There are quite a few more, but these are the basics that you need to know. The other data types that exist, they are for advanced students, and these are all the basics that you need to know to get yourself from beginner to intermediate. When you get into the advanced level, you might be hearing some new data types, but all of that we're going to clear it up as we move on in this tutorial. Let's go ahead and start with strings. So this is actually a string. Name equals to Developers College, then end your semicolon. This is a data type of our strings. You can figure out that with let's just do a quick program. Let's write for dump. What you're going to do is very simple. You're just going to write the name of the variable, and you should see the data type. So when we hit run, Okay, we have not saved that. Let's hit run. You can see it gives us the value string, 18 characters. So it's actually a string. This is what a string is. A string is just a sequence of characters like on Hello World Developers College. A string can be stored inside a single or double quotes. So as long as whatever you're writing is in between a double quote or single quote, is going to be of type string. Let's move on to integer. For example, we have, let's call this age, and let's add 20. This should, oh sorry, it's going to give you an error because we didn't change this to age. So once we changed it to age, it gives you integer. So an integer data type is a non-decimal number. An integer can be either positive or negative and must not have a decimal point. So as long as integer does not have a decimal point, it's going to identify as an integer. You must not, however, put a decimal point. For example, when you add .0, it's never going to identify as a string anymore. It's now a float, which we're going to get into very soon. But for now, this is an integer. An integer can have wider arrays of numbers, and it can also be of negative value. That means this can also be minus 20 and still be an integer. As you can see, it can have negative values and still be an integer. So moving on, we'll be going to look at floats. We'll be looking at float values. We'll be looking at float data types. A float in PHP is a number with a decimal point. It can be referred to also as double. So for example, if this has 321, this is now a float and no longer an integer. So as you can see, it's a float, no longer an integer. So this exactly is a float. A float always have a decimal point. You can also call it a double, but you can also call it float, whatever you like. But as long as it has a decimal point, it is now a float and no longer an integer. So moving on, we have Boolean. I'm hoping this is not the first time you're hearing that term, but if you are, a Boolean represents two possible states. It's either true or it's either false. You can use this in conditional testing, which we are going to get to in the later part of the tutorial, and it can also only have two values, either false or either true. It's tradition to keep it all in uppercase though. So when we check the value of that, let's quickly do a quick check. As you can see, it gives you bool, which is short for Boolean. So it's another data type, and it can only have two values, either true or either false. Moving on, we are going to move towards arrays. So I want you guys to listen to me carefully on this. An array is basically the single most important data type. I'm not saying it's actually important than the others, but it's actually very important in advanced programming. So I want you guys to really listen carefully on this. Although an array might seem something very simple, but when you get into data structures and algorithms, arrays are going to be extremely useful. So what exactly is an array in this case? So basically, an array stores multiple values in one single variable. I'm going to show you that now. For example, let's say we have a variable and we call it, say, pets. We can declare an array by typing the keyword not arrays, then start having your value. As we said earlier, it can have multiple values in just one variables. For example, what kind of pets do we have? We have dogs, we have cats, and we have, say, hamsters. Yeah, so these are all pets stored in a single variable. As you can see, it's only has it's only one variable, and it has three values. So if we put that now into it, pets, and we save that, let's run it, let's see what it has to say. As you can see, type array of 3 strings. So what you need to understand about array is that you need to understand the indexing. Dogs is not indexed as 1, it is actually indexed as 0. As you can see, 0. index is 0, 1, 2. So this actually has two values. But if you calculate it with your normal indexing, it has three. But programming starts the index at 0. So dogs is actually of value 0, cats 1, and hamsters 2. As you can see, of course, what we have in the array are considered strings because of course it's in double quotes. You can also have arrays that has just values. For example, let's integers, I mean 3. So we can have integers in an array. So when we run that, we're going to see, as you can see, it changes from string to int, which is just 1 characters each. But of course, the indexing still stays. It's still 0, 1, 2. But in your normal way of indexing, it has 3 values. But in programming, indexing actually starts from 0. So we're going to move into the last data type we're just talking about, null. So null in PHP is a special type of data that can only have one value, just null. Null essentially means that a variable has no value assigned to it yet. So for example, if I just clear all this and I just write null, it means that the variable has no value yet. So null can only have one value, which is null. It cannot have any other thing. As you can see, it just outputs null. That means it does not have any value just yet, but you can reassign values later on in your code, and that's going to lead us into the next topic, into the next section that we're discussing today. So let's talk about variable scopes. So we have two types of we have two variable scopes actually. We have local and we have global. So let's take global for a sec. When a variable is declared outside of a function, it is considered to have a global scope and can only be accessed outside of a function. So I'm going to show you what I mean right here. So for example, say we have a variable called pet and we called it dog. If we go ahead and create a function and ask it to echo out pet, it's actually not going to do that because a global variable can only be accessed. So we're going to go ahead and call out that function. So don't worry if you don't understand all of this here. So I'm going to break it down one by one. We are talking about scopes. A global scope is a variables that can be accessed outside of a function, while a local scope are variables that can be accessed only inside a function. For example, we have this variable pets. We have a function, and we inside of the function we have echo pets. That means we are asking the function to echo this value anytime it is called. But the problem is that pets is actually outside of the function, which means it has a global scope and cannot be accessed inside of this function. So when we call out the function, as you can see, we have an error. So as you can see, we have an error. It says that the variable pets is not defined, but we actually have it defined here. That is because PHP is looking for the function, is looking for the variable, I mean, inside of the function, not outside, which means this has a global scope and can only be accessed outside of a function. But what if we want to make this variable have a local scope? All we just need to do is create the variable here, and once we run it, we should see our variable. As you can see, variable dog, because the variable now has a local scope. So when we declare the variable inside of that function, it now has a local scope. But when it was declared outside of that function, it didn't have. When it was declared outside of the function, it had a global scope, and it could not be accessed inside the function. So when we called the function out here, the PHP looked for the variable inside of the function, not actually outside of the function. So now this variable has a local scope, and when it was outside the function, it had a global scope. Don't worry if you don't understand the functions. We are going to get into that in the upcoming tutorial. But for this tutorial, be rest assured that you have all that you need for variables. In the next tutorial, we're going to be talking about operators. And yeah, that's going to be fun because operators can actually help us to do a lot of things, play around with variables a whole lot more, and help us understand a whole big chunk of the programming concepts. If you're new to this world, operators are going to solidify your knowledge in programming because you can now actually perform operations on your code. So yeah, if you like that, be sure to subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell so that you can know when I upload the new video. Take care and peace.